What if I told you that setting boundaries isn't about just saying no? Think about it. If that were the case, you'd already have boundaries in your relationships. But instead, you find yourself rehearsing what to say, building up the courage to stand firm, and still, somehow, the moment someone pushes back, everything crumbles, and you're left wondering, why is this so hard? Well, I've got an answer for you. Saying no isn't a real problem. It's much more complex than that. It's not that simple. If it were, you wouldn't still be struggling. The truth is that the reason boundaries don't work for most people is hidden in the emotional patterns and habits you've built over the years. Patterns you might not even realize are there. The good news though is that once you understand these patterns, you can finally break free from the endless cycle of guilt and frustration. So in this video, I'm going to show you why most advice on boundaries fails, how your unique attachment style secretly shapes the way you approach them, a step-by-step process to set boundaries that actually stick, and how to deal with pushback. So trust me when I say, this is the last video you'll ever need to watch on setting boundaries. Okay, let's start by addressing why most boundary advice doesn't work. If you ever Google how to set boundaries, chances are you've come across advice like you just say no, or you need to be more assertive. And while these sound simple in theory, they're often impossible to put into practice. Why? Because they completely overlook the deeper emotional and psychological patterns that shape how we approach boundaries. Let me explain. Setting boundaries isn't just a behavior. It's influenced by how we've learned to connect with others starting from childhood. This is where attachment theory comes in. Attachment theory tells us that the way we form bonds with others, whether it's a secure, an anxious, or avoidant type, has a profound impact on how we set and enforce boundaries. For example, if you have an anxious attachment style, you might fear rejection or conflict, which can lead to saying yes too often, even when you're overwhelmed. On the other hand, if you're more avoidantly attached, you might struggle with addressing issues directly and instead shut down and withdraw entirely. That comes to add to what we mentioned earlier about struggling with boundaries, and that it doesn't mean you're weak or indecisive. It's your emotional wiring at play, shaped by the way you've learned to navigate relationships throughout your whole life, pretty much. When you start to recognize how your attachment style influences the way you set boundaries, things finally start to click. But awareness alone isn't enough. You need a new way to approach boundaries. So let's talk about what to actually do about it. And don't worry, I'm not about to throw some generic advice at you. This is a step-by-step approach that works because it's clear, it's doable, and most importantly, it's designed to work for you. And that starts with the first step. Figure out where your boundaries are breaking down. Emotions are your telltale sign in this case. Think about it. Have you ever left a conversation feeling completely drained? Or maybe you always say yes to something but then spend the rest of the day wishing you hadn't? Those feelings, resentment, frustration for example, they're like blinking warning lights telling you, hey, there is a boundary missing here. To deal with that, here's a little trick I use. I call it a boundary audit. For 1 week, just keep track of the moments that leave you feeling frustrated or drained. Is it a coworker who always piles extra work on you? Or maybe it's a friend who only calls when they need something? Write this down. You don't need to analyze them yet. This is just about spotting the patterns so you know where to focus. Okay, so now you've got a clearer picture of where things are going off the rails. But step 2 is all about how you actually set the boundary. And this is where most people get those feelings of guilt popping up because boundaries can feel confrontational sometimes. That's why you need to understand the following shift. Boundaries aren't something you force on someone else, they're agreements that make relationships healthier. For example, let's say someone keeps asking for last-minute favors and it's driving you up the wall. Instead of snapping and saying, I'm too busy, I can't help, try this. I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately and I want to make sure I'm fully present when I help. Can we plan this ahead next time? Do you see the difference? One feels like a flat-out rejection, the other invites understanding. And finally, step 3. This is the one that makes all the difference. Stick to your boundary. This is where most of us struggle, right? You set the boundary, but then someone pushes back and you're like, maybe just this once, and just like that, you're back at square one. Here's the deal. Boundaries only work if you respect them first. If someone challenges your boundary, stay calm, stay consistent, and avoid over-explaining. For example, if a coworker tries to rope you into last-minute tasks again, just restate your boundary. Say something like, I really need advance notice for things like this. Let's make a plan earlier next time. And let's be real, change isn't just hard for you, it's hard for the people around you too. They've gotten used to the version of you that said yes to everything, the version that let things slide to keep the peace. So when you start setting boundaries, it's natural for them to push back. You gotta accept that. Not because your boundaries are wrong, but because they're adjusting as well. So it is important to understand that facing pushback is not a sign that your boundaries aren't working. It's actually the opposite. It means you're disrupting an old dynamic. People resist boundaries because they're used to things being a certain way. Maybe they've relied on you to always say yes or to always put their needs first, and now you're showing them that things are going to be different. But the whole point I'm trying to make here is they're resistant doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means they need time to adapt. Think of it like this. When you change the rules of a game, it takes a while for everyone to learn the new way to play. But eventually, they all will. However, we need to address one more thing, going back to attachment styles. If you're someone with an anxious attachment style, pushback might hit you harder. So when someone reacts negatively, it might trigger the fear of rejection, making you feel like you need to fix their emotions or soften your boundaries to keep the peace. Therefore, you feel like their feelings are yours to manage. But the truth is that your job is to honor what's best for you, not to make everyone else comfortable. So the next time someone resists your boundary, pause and ask yourself, am I holding this boundary because it reflects what I need, or am I second guessing it because of their reaction? When you approach pushback with self-awareness, it stops feeling like a battle or a selfish act, and it starts to feel like what it actually is, growth. So as we've seen so far, setting boundaries isn't one size fits all. And that's what you should take from this video. It's influenced by so many personal factors, your experiences, your attachment styles, and even the dynamics of your relationships. And what works perfectly for one person might feel completely out of reach for someone else. And that's okay. Boundaries aren't about following a rigid set of rules. They're about finding an approach that feels right for you. Which is exactly why I created my personal growth program, a space where we work together to uncover the specific challenges holding you back. Whether it's fear of rejection, difficulty staying firm, or simply figuring out where to start. And the best part, it's completely tailored to your needs and goals. To make it easy for you to get started, I offer a free introduction call, which you can apply for by using the link in the description below. So that's it for today. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and share it with those family members who are always overstepping your boundaries so that they know from now on you're done with this. And before I go, you should probably check this video out since you want to set boundaries. It might help you as well.